First of all, I think for a lot of folks, I've noticed this. Define for people who are sitting back and saying, okay, you talk about the administrative state.
Yep.
What is that? Define it.
So it's this massive bureaucracy started over 100 years ago by the Progressive movement, which, by the way, Sean, wanted nothing to do with the original intent of the Constitution. The whole point of their movement was to destroy the political and moral authority of the U.S. Constitution, and in so doing, destroy the machinery of the Republic. And I use that term very specifically, Sean, because the machinery of the Republic is the separation of powers, where you have Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, legislative, executive, judicial branches in which there's a diffusion of power, because that's the greatest protector of our natural inherent rights. Progressives wanted nothing to do with that. They wanted to put together this massive bureaucracy, separated out from political accountability, which I want to discuss with you, filled with unelected bureaucrats who would do the real governing. And so when I talk about administrative state, again, massive bureaucracy, the deep state is part of it, surveillance state, whatever you want to call it, CIA, NSA, all of that. Very powerful aspect of the administrative state. Then you've got the regulatory state. And Sean, I think that's one of the greatest threats to our economic freedom, but also our national security. When you're having so many regulations, you're pushing stuff offshore. I think that's a real issue for us. And then I call it the retired in place part of the administrative state, the DMV state, where there's 800,000 non-essential federal employees that I truly believe are a patronage system for Democrats. I even call it, in some ways, I allude to this in the book a little bit, Sean. It's a patronage system, almost a money laundering operation in which Democrats are hiring these folks who, by the way, you know this, but I'll just say this for your listeners, typically 90, 95% of those political donations coming out of those employees of the administrative state go in one direction, and it's not to Republicans. So the administrative state and this conflict, the book is about the conflict, Sean, and I allude to it at the very beginning, where Donald J. Trump, the great outsider, shows up, duly elected president of the United States, and essentially declares, I'm the duly elected president. I'm the one who decides. A lot of domestic, but certainly a lot of foreign policy. And the administrative state said, we don't think so. We think we're the ones that decide. And that, if you want to peel everything away, Russian collusion, Ukrainian quid pro quo, lawfare, all of that, it is about who decides. And it's also a clash between two very differing governing philosophies, a republic versus administrative state.
All right. So let's break down this, right? You got the president, hopefully Donald Trump. You got 4,000 plus or minus political appointees. And then you have the administrative state, all of these lifelong bureaucrats that actually are the doer bees.
Yes.
How much of the problem are the appointees? Because one of the issues in Trump's first term was that he was appointing people that would be like, yeah, I get you're president. I get you got to do this, but I'm going to do it my way.
Correct. Yeah, no, I mean, Sean, I say it in the book. I'll say it now. One of the most critical, important positions that a lot of people don't know about inside administration is PPO, the Office of Presidential Personnel. You alluded to the Plum book. Again, it's 4,000, upwards of 5,000 political appointees, which, by the way, I was a Sched C a long, long time ago, Schedule C. 1,300 of those political appointees are just little worker bees in various departments and agencies. They have no decision-making authority. It's really about 400 or 500 key decision makers that administration appoints to go out to the various departments and agencies who are on the same page as the president, implementing his policies, his goals. And if you don't get PPO right, if you don't get those 400 or 500 decision makers right, you end up kind of where the first term was for the first 3 years. It was in the last year that he got PPO right, and then obviously was not able to get reelected. But those first 6 months of a second administration would have been epic. And I think if he gets reelected, he has fully figured out a lot of the problems with D.C. these days, stemming from the administrative state, which I'll point out, Sean, primarily resides inside the Article 2 executive branch, of which the duly elected president is the head of that branch and could do a lot of things to the administrative state if he so chooses.
So there's a lot of projects, efforts going on in D.C. to put I knew this is why I'm asking you this question. I didn't think I'd get the laugh right away, but I thought I'd get the laugh. Who are saying, don't worry, Mr. President. We're going to create a list for you, a resume bank. We'll vet these people. Is anyone doing it right, and how important is that?
So I'm not even going to bother being diplomatic. How insulting that some of these outside entities have said, we're going to actually, don't worry, you go fight the political fight. You go do all this, take all the slings and arrows. We got this. We'll figure out what your next administration looks like and all your policy agenda goals. I even had somebody tell me, well, 2025 is all about America First. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Where does Donald J. Trump fit into the, Make America Great, America First in 2025? So I think the thing that frustrates me a lot about some of these outside projects, first of all, Donald J. Trump, if and when, and I sincerely hope wins, when he wins, he is the one in charge of deciding who will be inside of his administration. Are people, is he more than happy to have people make suggestions? 100%. But the process by which those people will be decided and appointed comes down to Donald J. Trump and his internal team on transition, and then who he makes his PPO. And, in the first term, it was really a small committee of about 5 people, especially on the important positions, that made the final decision. And so I find it deeply unhelpful. What some people have done, they have shown I'm just going to say it. They are intellectually impaired when it comes to actual real politic in how it works, and also being of help to Trump or being detrimental to him. And I think the thing that's frustrated me about Project 2025, let's put a fine point on it, 80% name ID in battleground states that have acted as an albatross around Trump's neck. Please be quiet. Shut up. You have nothing to do with what the next presidential term looks like. That is Donald J. Trump's decision.
But, okay, fair enough. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. I was there, right?
Yep.
So there were plenty of times, and the president said to me sometimes, hey, tell me about this Ned Ryun. Should I hire him? Should I not? Or, hey, give me 5 names of people that I should consider. And I would give him names. I guess the question is, how do you staff? How do you hit the ground running? Because that's the issue. I feel like you're right. We need those first 6 months to be impactful and very clear. It's, hey, we're not screwing around anymore. We're coming. Because I remember a lot of conversations I'd have with people. They'd be like, the bureaucrats have made it clear. We're going to outlast you. We're going to just wait you out. We're not going to.
100%.
So how do we get him a cadre of key people? Because I wouldn't know if somebody said to me, hey, who are the best people to take
Transition's
on?
already started. The pieces for transition are already in place. They're already putting those pieces in place. Listen, I think that there are multiple databases.
So that's where it should go through, is the Linda McMahon kind of group that he has anointed and said, this is my team, Don, Eric, Elon, Tulsi.
Which I'd very much like to be part of the transition personnel decisions. I will be talking with them about that. But, if anybody's put together databases for potential people, overkill in some places. I think 20,000 people is insane, especially when there's only about a 5,000 person plum book, of which really only about 500 really count. You got to go through transition. That's Trump's prerogative. If people have put together databases that might be useful reference points, fine, great, all for it, good for them. The biggest part to me is ultimately the decision comes down to Trump and his team and making those right decisions. And having gone through, I will say this, Sean, having gone through 4 years and now another almost 4 years of total persecution, lawfare, etc., I think Trump is, first of all, I don't think he fully understands his power as executive, as head of the executive branch. 2, he's figured out where the real fight is with these administrative state actors. I think he has done a lot of thinking about this and put some pieces in place, and he has some very good advisors who have put in place a series of executive orders that I think will be very interesting to be executed in the first week of his next administration. So let's say that, just for hypothetical, that he deals with the Schedule Cs, the people that he can appoint. There was some talk. Low level. Those are low level.
Okay.
Right.
But the bottom line is, let's say that he gets that piece right, that you got Trump at the top, the schedule, the political appointees.
The higher appointees. Yep.
The administrative state, the people who have said, yeah, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to implement this regulation or this executive order through our agency. How do we root them out, change it, get it right? So
a lot of people have talked about Schedule F, which you reclassify some of these folks. What they have done, Sean, over the course of decades is insulated themselves. I mean, that was the whole point to begin with. I just want to put another fine point on that. The progressives and administrative state, they wanted these bureaucrats to be insulated from any political accountability, and they've done a really good job of doing that. That was the point at the beginning, and over the course of the years have insulated themselves even more. But you can reclassify them. Schedule F, reclassifying some of these folks, reduction in force exercises, in-person visits. This is one thing I mentioned in the last chapter, some reform items. The whole last chapter is about a lot of reform items where the head of the executive branch can go visit some of these various departments and agencies, call on the carpet, these bureaucrats who are not actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, stalling. We all know what they do, Sean, especially those of us that have been in D.C. It has been a stalling tactic where they just go, oh, that's not really a priority. 6 months later, nothing really happens. A year later, nothing. He calls them in front of him as head of executive branch, these bureaucrats that are stalling, and asks, why are you not doing what you're supposed to be doing? You should be doing it. If they will not do it, he fires them on the spot. Then it goes to the Supreme Court. Guess what? With this Supreme Court, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. And I'm sure Donald Trump and his administration would be happy to have that conversation in front of the Supreme Court about who's the head of the executive branch and what you're supposed to be doing as a member of that. So let's add a whole series of reform items. You can even do voluntary buyouts. So there's a whole series of things I put in the back that you have to go after this, devolve and dismantle the administrative state. Some of it's going to be highly contentious, Sean. I am not naive on that front. I've told people if and when Trump wins and he declares the administrative state's days are numbered, it will be one of the coldest political wars you have ever seen in Washington, D.C. All this stuff has been a warm-up act for what would come next if he actually goes down this path.
This underscores what you said at the beginning. The Democrats understand what's at stake. This is a power base for them. It's not just patronage, obviously. That's part of it. But the idea that they know that they can have people there that are going to implement progressive policies regardless of what they do. And so this actually
it's their golden calf.
Right. This is an existential threat to their well-being. Do you think one of the ideas that came up last cycle, and it started to get implemented a little, but I don't think people appreciated what you're writing about at the time, is what about moving a lot of these places out of D.C.? So
I love that.
Just because then it's closer to where they should be in terms of the problems. Like, why isn't the Department of Interior out in New Mexico or Wyoming?
Correct. Or Department of Agriculture in Kansas, where I grew up. I actually mentioned this in my first book, Restoring Our Republic, when I kind of started to delve into a little bit of this problem that I fully focused on with American Leviathan of, break apart the Leviathan. Put people in North Dakota, put them in Kansas, put them in any other place except for D.C., break apart the state. And at that point, too, you'll probably see people resigning, retiring of their own volition. So you'll see a downsizing because of that. And I think it's one of the reform items. Trump would have to get on board with that because of all the reform items that I've heard discussed that he likes. This is maybe not top of his list. I don't think he's crazy about it, but I think it's one that would actually point us in the right direction. But I want to say something about why Democrats are going to be so vociferous in their defense of and their attacks against Trump in regards to this administrative state. Progressives have always thought this, and you can see it in their thinking even today. The state is salvation, Sean. It is what is going to solve all of society's ills. It will bring us to a higher plane of perfection as mankind. So if the state is salvation, in progressives thinking, mind you, why would we ever want to limit salvation?
Right.
And people ask, why does government continue to grow and grow and grow? Because it's built into the DNA of the administrative state. If the state is salvation, you should never limit salvation until it invades every aspect of your life and saves every aspect of your life. Education, healthcare, you name it. That's how they think. So in their minds, the growth of the state is perpetual until it brings salvation. And that's why you find yourselves, what are we, $36 trillion in debt? That's why they're proposing.
I'm so glad you just said the debt word. I brought this up last week with the panel. And I said, what is an issue that is not getting the attention that you thought it was? I think China, AI are two of them, but debt is another one. And debt is because of a lot of things. People, the programs, and to your point, like the more that the thing that I want to put a point on what you said, and this is where people have to understand it. As soon as we solve welfare and put people back to work, a bunch of bureaucrats don't exist anymore. It is in their 100%. Interest to keep people entrapped in a system, whether it's SNAP or WIC or whatever, because as soon as people are not dependent on the government, there's no need for them. But how do we, I think one of the things is, how do we address, I don't see any member of Congress right now championing waste and whatever, right? You talk about the Department of Defense. They can't pass an audit. You ask some of these places, how many employees do you have? How many employees? I don't know. How can you not know how many people you have and what you're spending money on? And by the way, say, can I have more? Can you give me more money? Okay, fine. What did you do with the money I gave you last time? I don't know. I mean, moron would ever agree to that? No parent would agree to it, no business. And yet we go, okay, how much?
This is the crazy part to me, Sean. We don't actually have a precise agreed upon figure of how big the federal government is. It's somewhere over 440 in regards to departments, agencies, and sub-agencies, but people disagree. Is it 440? Is it 443? We don't even have a precise figure. And yet Congress, this to me is the kabuki theater that takes place every election cycle. I'm going to get elected. I'm going to go to D.C. I'm going to fight government. I'm going to downsize it. We're going to return to limited government. As most of those people saying that actually just blindly continue to fund the administrative state, which is problem on two fronts, Sean. The Article 1 branch, the legislative branch, is supposed to legislate. They cannot subdelegate their legislative authority to these unelected bureaucrats with their statutes and regulations who are doing the real governing. So people ask, why are they passing these 4,000 or 5,000 page bills that nobody reads? Kind of the point, right? You pass a 4,000 or 5,000 page bill, kind of frames out in general kind of some of the things that are to be addressed, and then the bureaucrats put the fine point on it with their statutes and regulations, which allows them to do two things, the elected officials. They go back home to the district and go, that's not really my fault. That was the EPA or the FDA. Those bureaucrats who are doing this to you, I'm going to go back to D.C. I'm going to fight that as hard as I can. As they passed a bill that empowered the unelected bureaucrats to actually do that because it allows them to get off the hook. It has made their lives so much easier to not govern.
So I want to go down a bit of a rabbit hole. Just walk with me on this for a second.
Okay, I'll try.
The first question is this. Can we solve the question that you're raising in the book, the inherent problems with the American administrative state, without having the White House? In other words, can Congress do anything, or do we need to have the White House?
It would require them to actually have guts and
well, that's the second question. All right,
be politically spineless. No, you cannot.
You're getting ahead. Just give me the first question first. Like, let's just say that we don't win the election. Can Congress do anything?
Well, it would go back to requiring them to actually show some political courage and actually wanting them to do what they're supposed to do, and they will not do it.
But that's my second question then. But I just want to be clear on something, because I believe that while you could probably do a political science class that, yes, Congress has the purse strings. The only one who's going to do it, number one, is Trump. So, I don't really care. I think the executive can do it, but I also think that Trump's the only one with the
he rejects the premise. That's because he rejects
the man parts.
Well, let me put he's the only one that has the political courage and the guts to actually say, I reject the premise. Again, why he's an existential threat to them, because unlike a lot of previous presidents until, I would say, back to Reagan, a lot of them have accepted the premise that the administrative state is fine, and their only real issue is we don't get to run it. And you ask, could Congress do it? Of course they could. Like you said, the House holds the purse strings where the budget starts, and they could say,
I mean, this is what I don't get.
We're not going to fund this anymore.
But see, this is, to me, so this is literally,
because you have to have political courage.
But the thing that's so funny is I will have member after member and senator after senator on the show, and I'll say, hey, let me ask you a question. I know this is small potatoes, but why are we funding NPR? And they go, I agree with you, Sean. That's a horrible thing, and we should continue to fight. And, in the next bill, I'm going to tell someone who sits next to me that I don't really think. And I'm like, yeah, but you do understand that all you have to do is say no. And I would be willing to have a fight to say, why are we funding in this day and age a liberal radio station and programming on PBS, with the internet, et cetera, and just make the Democrats own it. And they go, that's a good point you're making. And I'm like, okay, well, see, I don't have a vote. You do. But no one will fight the fight. I'm like, I would love you just to take the
because they're afraid.
Stuff. That's it. I don't get it. Is that it? They're just a bunch
afraid.
Of yeah.
Yeah, they are afraid. They're afraid. First of all, my dad was in Congress 10 years.
I served with him. He was on the budget committee with me.
A lot of people that are in Congress, this is their life's goal, right? This is their pinnacle of success. They are experts in self-preservation. So, Sean, for them to actually go and make some hard decisions that might bring them under intense attack from corporate propagandists, I refuse to call them corporate media. You've dealt with a lot of them over the course of your career. I consider a lot of them dishonest, unethical, whose point is not honesty and truth. It's about amplifying the approved narrative and being attack dogs to protect those who hold the same worldview, administrative state. So these people that refuse to act in Congress, art of self-preservation. They don't want to take the hard stance for fear they'll come under attack. And even more importantly, they might lose their next reelection and they won't be in D.C. anymore. They won't be called Congressman so-and-so or U.S. Senator so-and-so. and they'll have to go back to the private sector. So there's a whole host of nasty incentives. And what has been allowed in this current form of government, they pass it off to those unelected bureaucrats. Then they go home and bemoan it. While most of the American people don't fully understand this, again, kabuki theater that's taking place to go, well, wait a minute. It's because you're abdicating unconstitutionally your legislative power to these unelected bureaucrats to duck the hard decisions.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.